Hey everybody, welcome back to Marriage Monday. My name is AJ McGraw, the pastor over our marriage ministry here at Grace Covenant Church, and I'm here with a very special guest.
Garrison Fuller,
Garrison
y'all. I made it to Marriage
Fuller.
Mondays.
He is officially in the Marriage Monday crew. You've now been married how long?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah.
You have one daughter.
One daughter. She's 6 months old, turning 7 in a couple of weeks, so I'm super excited about life.
She is beautiful. The first Fuller grandbaby.
It's wild, man.
Spoiled crazy, I assume?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My mom is buying everything. She one time almost handed me her credit card.
Bless the Lord. I need to
my
come
soul.
by and get a little bit of that anointing.
Yes, sir.
Well, listen, Garrison and I are here without our wives for a specific reason. We are talking about husbands of grace today. So you may have seen, in fact, Garrison's mother, Miss Cynthia, and my wife, Michelle, doing Wives at Grace events over the past few months here at Grace Covenant, and we thought we ought to do some content for husbands. So today we're bringing you Husbands of Grace, which is this. If you're a wife, we hope that this moment helps shed some light on what goes through your husband's mind, how we think, what goes on up here, because we're not always the best at expressing that, are we?
No, we're not.
Yeah.
So hopefully this helps us, or you and your spouse, you and your husband relate in a way that is now going in deeper to the feelings that he has without really being able to express them well.
That's it. And for husbands, men, this is our moment. We want to call you up and also maybe give you some language to help you connect with your wife on a way that maybe you haven't been able to give voice to some things you might be thinking or feeling or seeing in your marriage. You're not sure, is that normal? Am I supposed to feel that way? Do all men struggle with this? Or is it just me? And that's kind of the goal for today. Now, at our first Marriage Monday in June, when we did a roundtable with the Bendixes, I promised that we would do a Q&A follow-up. Well, here's the thing. We didn't get any Q's, so therefore we have no A's. So instead of Q&A, we're doing Husbands of Grace. So we're going to chat about this, and I hope that it blesses you. But Garrison, help me out here. Tell me, you've been married 2 years. You've got a 6-month-old daughter. What's the greatest lesson that you've learned in that time period of being married?
I'd say the greatest lesson that I've learned in this time frame of being married really is conflict and how to deal with conflict. Because my wife is the type which she retreats when conflict comes up. Okay. I'm the type which pushes full forward ahead.
You go all in.
I go all in.
You want to deal with it now.
All in. One of my friends told me, he said, you're either like a rhino or like a hedgehog. You bulldoze into the way of the conversation, or you retreat and curl up in a ball and try to run away. My wife is the hedgehog. And so the first thing that we had to figure out was, how do we deal with conflict together? Because I want to talk about it immediately. She needs to dwell on it. She needs to process. I'm a verbal processor, so I'm processing out loud, throwing out ideas as to what's wrong, trying to address the situation or the problem. She's like, let me think about it for 4 hours. Let me think about it for a whole night.
She needs some time to process.
She does.
What's funny about that is most of the couples that I've sat with, and this is true in my marriage as well, is I'm the opposite. Yeah. When Michelle and I have an argument or a disagreement or there's something coming up, most men I've talked to, we want to step back and process. And I've asked every man that I've talked to about this, why, and it's always this: I don't want to say something that I can't take back. I don't want to put something out there that in the heat of the moment, I'll say something about you or the way I feel, and I misrepresent myself, and then I've got to do damage control on the back end. And so then I ask their wives, who are a little bit more like you, so maybe you can speak to this. They want to handle it now. Because the thought is, if we let this go, it's going to create distance and space in the relationship, and I don't know what's going to happen. Let's handle it now.
And I think for me, that's the way it is. It creates distance and space. But not only that, I can't stop thinking about it. So when we don't resolve the situation, there's still the conflict in my mind. And now I'm putting myself at a distance towards her where she's already like, okay, I've moved past it. And so I need to confront it. I need to talk about it, because if I don't, it still lingers with me. And then I still hold this slightly bitterness to where I'm like, you frustrate me, but I love you so much. And so that's why I go full force into it. But now that I've realized the communication, the way we conflict or the way that we deal with conflict in each other is really trusted or built on good communication. And so that we've practiced good communication now has really helped us to develop this way that we have conflict now can be resolved quickly.
Good. Yeah, no, I have found that what's easier for me is to switch gears when there's conflict. So I'm a little bit different than you, so hopefully this is helpful to give you the other end of the spectrum. Whereas, if we have a conflict in the morning or there's an issue, something happened, whatever it is, and then I get in the car to leave, I can switch my mind off from conflict and switch into work mode. And my wife, who is like you in this case, she can't.
Yeah.
That's going to be present forever. So I think for a lot of men, depending on which end of the spectrum that you land on, and wives who watch too, I think the takeaway from this is that both of us need to give grace to the other.
Abundant grace.
I will tell men, if you're like me and you step back and you need a day or two to process, to get your feelings right and all that, listen, speed it up.
Yeah.
Move a little faster. Learn to process a little bit quicker. Because on the other end is your wife who's saying, what's going on? What's
really
happening?
Good.
What's
really
going
good.
through your mind? And then for folks in your case who are like, we need to do it now, like right now, let's have it out. Let's have grace to slow down and understand that on the other side is somebody who is thinking, I don't want to put us in a place I can't get us out of, say something I can't take back.
And I think that kind of goes along with how we're supposed to lead the household.
Good, okay.
I think that when we address the conflict well, we're now leading the household well. If we fail to address it well, we are now causing this dissonance or this mistrust that builds as a result of us not doing it well. And so we need to lead ourselves first.
This is great. So let's talk about this then. Let's talk about, what does leadership look like in the household, in your marriage as a man? You know, we talk a lot about men are supposed to be the head of the household, supposed to be the leaders. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I've seen in our society today, a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, they have the goal here and they say, okay, I'm going to be up here, meet me here.
Right.
Whereas what marriage is and what the leadership type of marriage is supposed to be is more like what Jesus modeled with his followers, with his disciples, where he grabbed them and he walked with them. He didn't tell them to meet him at a place. He did that sometimes, but most of the time he was taking them and leading them, guiding them, holding them by the hand, walking with them so that they could go together. You're not supposed to tell your spouse, meet me here. If you tell her, meet you there, you're going to have some problems. Because now you're telling her, I'm the leader, you're supposed to follow me.
Right.
Whereas leadership is built on trust. And if we don't have that trust, we cannot lead them well. So we need to guide them. We need to walk with them instead of telling them, meet me here.
That's good. And so us walking together with our spouse, right? And for a lot of us, we try to bring a corporate mindset into a sacred space, which is the marriage covenant before God. And we say, well, listen, God's appointed me to be the CEO. So what I say goes. Well, brother, that is a failing business model in marriage, right? That just doesn't work. There's got to be trust, which you hit on. And so I want to go into trust for a second, because, you know, the great leaders that we look up to, the great role models that we have, there's an implicit like trust that we have in those people, that they are going to take us where they say they're going to take us. They're going to do what they say they do. And so that gives us a sense of of security and of peace. So how do you, in a marriage, how do you build trust?
Yeah, I think it starts with really your relationship with God, truthfully.
Okay, good.
When your relationship with God is built on a right foundation, you can then lead somebody well because you're first learning how to be a follower. I think the greatest leaders are not the ones with the greatest skill set, not the ones with the most or the gift of communication, not the ones who have the greatest amount of money or the greatest anything. I think they're the ones who follow the best.
Great.
When you have a great follower of Jesus, you have a great leader of people. And in the same way, you have a great leader of your wife.
That's huge.
The way that we build trust through that is by saying, I'm going to keep my word.
Yeah, right.
If I don't keep my word, trust is going to be broken. And
Straight
so
up.
if I say I'm going to build a shelf and it'll be done Monday at 2 p.m. and I put it off for another week and then I say, I'll get to it next week, I'll get to it the third week, and then a month goes by and 2 months goes by and now your wife brings it up and you're like, oh, I'm going to get to it. She's asking you to fulfill your word.
Right.
And that's what God did with his son Jesus, where he came and he said, I'm going to reconcile you to myself so that we can enter this relationship. When we fulfill our word, we're now building a bridge of trust for our wives to say, I'm going to follow where they lead.
That's really good. That's really good. And in cases where trust has been broken, right? And there's a pattern of, man, Garrison, that sounds great. You know, you build trust by trusting them, but I've trusted my husband or I've trusted my wife, and time after time they've let me down. Why am I going to treat them, or why am I going to extend faith to them again? How am I going to build and repair? And all of us, me, you, all of us have let our wives down and said we'd do something and not delivered, right? Like we have done that. But I think it's the pattern over time to prove yourself trustworthy. And I think the hard truth with this is when you're looking to reestablish trust, the principle remains the same. The only way you can learn if you can trust somebody is to trust them. And so I think of
That's
when
really
Jesus
big.
tells Peter, right, he comes and says, how often should I forgive my brother who has sinned against me? Is it 7 times? And Jesus says what?
70 times 7.
70 times 7, right? And it's the same idea. We've got to bring that mindset into marriage of, man, I've trusted him and he's let me down. But husbands, if we're in a place where we need to rebuild trust or reestablish it, that's the only way that is going to happen, is for you to make the promise, make the commitment, and show the slow, steady progress over time that you are a man of your word, that you're faithful, and your wife can trust you. You can't make them trust you without any action.
Yeah.
Those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And in that trust comes, again, safety and security. And when we have safety and security in our marriage, we can begin to thrive as individuals.
I think that's so good.
I'm going to keep us moving, but I got a couple more things that I
Yeah.
want to hit on, and we're running out of time. But here's this. Let's talk about, as a husband, what have you found to be one of the most challenging things?
I think one of the most challenging things for me is truthfully loving my wife the way that she needs to be loved and not the way that I want her to be loved.
Interesting. Yeah, good. Talk about that.
We did the 5 love languages. I think this is a really good way for us to connect and for us to build. But we did these, and mine came out, I'm heavy on quality time. So when you just sit in the room with me, we don't have to talk, we don't have to do anything. If you watch a show with me, that's good enough.
That's good for you. Yeah, presence.
For her, she needs quality time, touch, words of affirmation, gifts, and service.
So she got all 5, but she needs all of them.
And so for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I tend to try to love her the way that I receive love.
Right.
Instead of giving her the love the way that she receives
Right.
love. And so what I've needed to practice so much and constantly be aware of it and to continue to cultivate it is I need to love her the way she needs to be loved. Because God loves me the way that I needed to be loved.
So good.
I need to love her the way that she needs to be loved,
Yeah, that's
because
good.
we're not just called to lead our spouses, we're called to love them as well.
Good.
And if we just lead them without love, now we're acting like a dictator rather than a spouse, rather than a husband.
You know, it's so funny you said what you just said, which is that we're not called just to lead our spouse, but to love them. And I know for many men, we are drawn to leadership, roles of authority, control, power, all of that resonates. Love is like kind of a squishy thing I'm not really comfortable with. But what does Paul say in Ephesians, right? He says, men, you are to what? Love your wives like Christ loves the church.
Yeah.
And he gave his life up for them. And that's a profound thing, right? He leads with love.
So big.
What do we latch on to? Men are the head of the household.
Yeah.
Right? And we have flipped on its head what must be preceded with love.
Yeah.
Because God's love for us, anything that we have on this earth, whether it's a title, whether it's finances, whether it's a relationship, whether it's just a hope, good friend, any of that has been given to us by the Father out of what? Out of his love for us. So we lead with love. That's so good. And learn to love them the way they need to be loved, which, again, when we talk about dying to yourself in marriage. Every day you die to yourself, every day. Learning to love your spouse the way they need it, which is going to cause you to do something different. That's a little bit of that. So let's talk. Okay.
No. Go ahead.
Let's talk about then the best thing about being a husband. What's the best thing that you found?
The best thing about being a husband really is having somebody in your corner. Like being able to go home and know that the person that I'm going home to has supported me, has given her all for me, has committed to me, and not only that, but pushes me to be better. I think that's so beautiful. And what really it is supposed to be is all of these things, but also fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we sometimes
yeah.
limit this to where it's like, man, I gotta go home. She's gonna tell me about this. She's gonna tell me about this. But like, we need to have fun too.
Yeah.
So my wife and I,
Great.
we go out to eat. We have dates. We do all these things, and our favorite pastime is trying new foods. So we'll go to different restaurants. We'll try this different restaurant, and we'll have fun doing that.
Yeah.
I think that's the most fun thing, is having somebody in your corner for life.
Yeah. Well, I love that, because you sound like a man who's been married for 2 years. You know, we're having fun, we're trying new foods, we're going out on dates, it's great.
Right?
But this is the perspective, because what happens to us, so we're coming up on 11 years in June of marriage,
11,
right?
man.
11 years, so we're happy about that, double digits is great. But we will lose the perspective we had, right? I think now of Jesus speaking to the church in Ephesus in Revelation, right? You have lost your first love, right? Come back to your first love. And these are the things, as we look about whether we are just trying to strengthen our marriage or build or rebuild our marriage, let's go back to our first love, right? And the perspective with which we look at our spouse, like the newlyweds that I counsel, I talk about the thing that's so beautiful, like frame this moment, right? Not just wedding and celebration. The beauty is you have a person that for the rest of your life, you are entering this covenantal agreement that I've got their back, they've got my back. They're going to love me when I'm sick and when I'm healthy. They're going to love me if I'm rich or if I'm poor. They're going to love me on my good days. They're going to love me on my bad days, for better or for worse. Now, we all focus on better. We don't like to talk about worse. But there are worse days where you come home, you've had a bad day, man. You say some things you don't want to say. But if we view our spouse as part of the anchor of our lives, then that joy, I mean, that comes with that, right? Because there's no other person. I mean, maybe your parents, but we all have different relationships with parents, right?
Yeah.
But there's no other person that willingly enters into that type of covenantal relationship with you than your spouse. And that's a beautiful thing.
And I think some of the challenges that come along with being married and having this beautiful relationship is your differences, right?
Yeah, great. Great.
It's so hard to get past the differences sometimes because my wife is so different than I am. She's a planner. She likes to have things organized. She likes to know what's going to happen next. I'm over here just like, hey, let's do it. Let's be spontaneous. Forget about the plan. Let's throw it out the window. Let's just have a good time. The beautiful thing about this is, and I had to learn this from her because she taught me. Let me tell you, my wife is so much better than I am.
Come on, man,
so
tell
much
him.
better. She's
him.
taught me so much stuff about being vulnerable, about being emotional, about being kind, about being gentle, and what gentleness and all of these things look like. But one of the things she told me, and I'll never forget this, she said, we don't need to let our differences divide us. We need to let them complement each other.
That's great.
And I was like, whoa, you're telling me that your gifts are my weaknesses. And that's where the compliment comes from, is that now when I'm not a great planner, she picks up on it.
Right.
Now when she doesn't want to speak in a public place, I pick up on it.
Yeah.
And so now we complement each other to where we can live this life out. And what God, when he made Eve from Adam, he said, I'm making a partner suitable for him.
Great.
I think that's so important, is that the suitable means different.
Yeah.
Because if you have somebody who's just like you,
you're
going to
be
a weak dude.
It drives you crazy.
And so having a spouse, having a wife who fills in my gaps, makes me a better man.
That's so good. And that, I think, is the beautiful picture of marriage, of two becoming one, of two complementing one another. And it goes back to the way that we view our spouse, right? Are we treating them with grace? Are we assuming positive intent? That you know, they may not be communicated the way we want. We all fail to communicate. That they may have raised an issue that we don't, that causes a fight. But at the end of the day, like, do I understand and appreciate that the strengths of my wife fill in the weaknesses that I have a man? Or am I too proud to acknowledge that I've got any weaknesses, and I take her help as criticism?
That hurts.
And I take her advice as being critical and cutting, when really I think the intent is she wants to help. Like anything I've learned of my wife wants to help me in everything. She wants us to succeed. She wants us to thrive. She wants us to do that. Now, we sometimes take different paths to get there, but I cannot step on her, squelch her, get mad at her for trying to guide us in the right direction. And I'll tell you this as a last thought. It's usually women that bring their husbands to get help from the pastor, right?
I believe it.
So what does that tell me? This is my last thought. That tells me this. Men, we have all too often forsaken the mantle of leadership that Christ has placed on you in the household. Now, when we talk about men being the head of the household, it's an image of the Trinity. That Jesus, God, the Father, the Holy Spirit, they're all equal. But when Jesus came to earth, he says what? He says, I do only what the Father tells me. I go where the Father tells me to go. I do what he tells me to do. I say what he tells me to say. That's a picture of what? Of submitting your will to the Father's will. Is it a question of equality? No. Jesus and God always equal. It's a question of order and honor, which is what we want to establish, but we want to demand it. All the issues, hear me guys, all the issues that you have in your marriage, in your relationship, are your problem, okay? I won't say they're all your fault, but they're all your problem, which means you have to put the mantle of leadership, which is not a seat of honor. Like, we've reduced leadership to, like, you know, wealth and like glory and honor. No. In marriage, the leadership, it's a mantle, it's a weight, it's a responsibility to die every day, to not get what you want. I think of Jesus, didn't get to go where he wanted, do what he wanted. Whenever he healed somebody, they criticized him. When he did miracles, they arrested him, right? When he made claims about who he actually was, they murdered him. Man, this is our calling, to step into that role, to buck up, to be strong, to look at our wives as the person under which they should come under our covering, that we create a safe space in our household, in our relationship, that they can thrive, that they can flourish, that they can grow into all that God has called them to grow into, and they can support you on your journey in the same. So that's my last thought to you, is to to accept the mantle of responsibility of leadership in your household, to be the husband God has called you to be, to bear that weight and to bear it well. And listen, we at Grace, we're here to walk with you in that journey. If you've got questions about this, if you just need some prayer or just some help, you want to talk a little bit more about what it means to be a husband, or maybe you're having issues with your husband and you say, Pastor AJ Garrison, help me with my husband. I get it. We're here for you. We want to walk with you. We believe healthy families change the world. You can email marriage@gracecove.org and we'll connect and continue the journey. Garrison, thank you so much, man. This was so fun.
So much fun.
Appreciate you. We'll see you next time for Marriage Monday.
See y'all.